Last time we spoke about Manchukuo. In the early 1930s, Ishu Ecy sought to dominate Manchuria to secure resources and counter American influence. He envisioned Manchukuo as a pan-Asian league promoting racial cooperation, despite it being a puppet state under Japan. With Puyi as a figurehead, Ishu Ecy aimed for autonomy, but his plans faced resistance from the Quangong Army, who obviously prioritized control. As conflicts arose, Ishu Ecy's vision of unity clashed with military interests, leading to his eventual isolation and reassignment, marking a tumultuous chapter in Manchukuo's history. In November of 1931, Tohara orchestrated the Tianjin Incident, facilitating the removal of Puyi from his home to establish the puppet state of Manchukuo. By March of 1932, Puyi was declared its ruler, but his authority was merely symbolic, overshadowed by Japanese control. Despite international condemnation, Japan solidified its grip on Manchuria, exploiting its resources and suppressing local resistance. By the late 1930s, Manchukuo would become a colonial entity, suffering harsh economic policies while Puyi's regime served as a facade for Japanese imperial ambition. This episode is Operation Nekka, the invasion of Rehe. Welcome back to the Fall and Rise of China podcast. I'm your dutiful host, Greg Watson. But before we begin, I just want to remind you all that this podcast is only made possible through the efforts of Kings and Generals over at YouTube. Perhaps you want to learn a bit more about the history of Asia. Kings and Generals has an assortment of episodes on the history of Asia, and so much more. So go give them a look over at YouTube. So please subscribe to Kings and Generals over at YouTube. It can help produce this content by checking out www.patreon.com/kingsandgenerals. And hey, don't forget about our sister podcast over at the Pacific War Week by Week podcast, written and narrated by me. And if after all that, if you're still hungry for some more history, why don't you check out my personal channel, the Pacific War channel found over at YouTube, and Echoes of War, my newly titled podcast series on all major podcast platforms. Over on YouTube, I just released a full documentary covering the Boxer Rebellion and Russo-Japanese War. And over on Echoes of War, we just released the first part in a new series covering the Malayan campaign of World War II. And hey, if you'd like to support me further, please check out my YouTube membership or my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/thepacificwarchannel. By joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, early access to all the content I make, and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. From the very beginning of their consolidation of Manchukuo, the Quangong Army regarded the province of Rehe, today's Johul province, to be an integral part of it. According to some of the Quangong Army leadership, all of Rehe would be necessary to consummate Manchukuo. In April of 1932, the IJA 8th Division, based at Hirosaki in Aomori Prefecture, was transferred to Manchukuo under secret orders to prepare for an invasion of Rehe. Now, Rehe province covers about 160,000 square kilometers, and back then it held about 2.3 million people. Since about 1926, it was ruled by General Tang Yulin. His direct command was over the NRA 36th Division, consisting of 13,000 regular troops, with a provincial militia of about 8,500 men. As was the warlord practice of the time, Tang Yulin exploited his population. Until July of 1932, Tang Yulin's attitude towards the emerging state of Manchukuo, directly to his east, was certainly favorable. This is because Tang Yulin favored the Japanese. During the debacle that was the invasion of Manchuria, Tang Yulin had done everything possible to prevent Zhang Shiliang from moving into Rehe whenever he was trying to consolidate forces there. Now, Tang Yulin had no greater aspirations. It's not like he loved Japan or believed the Japanese were better leaders for his nation. What he was motivated by was a practical concern. It was economics. More precisely, the opium trade. Rehe's number one source of income was opium, and their number one client was Manchuria. Thus, as one can imagine, when Manchukuo was being formed and the opium door closed on him, well, he took some heavy financial losses. On July the 17th of 1932, an incident broke out between the towns of Chaoyangshi and Nanning. A Japanese civilian employed by the Quangong Army, Ishimoto Gonshiro, was abducted by a Rehe militia group while taking the train from Jinzhou to Chaoyang. General Nishi Yoshikazu, the commander of the IJ 8th Division stationed at Jinzhou, dispatched a small unit to rescue Ishimoto. In doing so, they occupied Chaoyangshi, where they also protested the Ruh provincial government. This did not see Ishimoto handed over to them, so General Nishi bombarded Chaoyangshi, and he had his forces advance upon Nanning. Even doing so, no Ishimoto was to be found, so Nishi withdrew back to Jinzhou. The following year, during what would become known the invasion of Rehe, Ishimoto's body would be found at Chaoyangshi. Zhang Shiliang utilized this small incident to advance into Rehe. Claiming he was acting upon orders from Nanjing, he moved his northeastern army to the border of Rehe, due south of the Great Wall. Zhang Shiliang then threatened Tang Yulin and bribed his subordinates to defect over to him. Consequently, by late July, Tang Yulin tossed the towel and for the first time sanctioned passage of a volunteer army through Rehe. Come August, Zhang Shiliang organized a volunteer force about 40,000 strong, obviously all from his northeastern army, to advance from Gubeikao into Rehe, where they sought to confront the Quangong Army if they decided to advance. Zhang Shiliang was heavily in contact with Chiang Kai-shek during this period. Zhang Shiliang was making multiple proclamations about retaking Manchuria, and Chiang Kai-shek was supporting him in that endeavor as best as he could. Meanwhile, Tang Yulin was sort of stuck in the middle. Between October of 1932 to January of 1933, Shanghai Guan, the strategic gateway and midpoint between Mukden and Beijing, became the focal area of three major skirmishes. The Boxer Protocol of 1901 dictated that some of the 8-nation alliance members, notably France, Italy, and Japan, were allowed to maintain small contingents at Shanag. In 1932, the Japanese garrison there was about 261, France had 61 men, and Italy 69. After the establishment of Manchukuo, Japan had increased its garrison to have more border guards in the town of Shanag itself. Of course, the Chinese also had local troops. This was the 9th Independent Brigade commanded by Manchukuo, a force roughly of 9,000 men. The first skirmish at Shanag would break out October the 1st between Manchukuo's men and an armored train of troops from the IGA 8th Division. Another identical event occurred on December the 8th, but on both occasions, they were settled locally and peacefully, with the Chinese offering an apology and reparations. Then a third clash broke out on January the 1st, but this one certainly got out of hand. The mastermind behind the third incident was Major Jinkuro, the leader of the Japanese garrison at Shanag. Upon his orders at 9 p.m., 3 Japanese soldiers tossed 2 hand grenades each into the backyard of the Japanese military police detachment and the railroad track running in front of the Japanese garrison. This was, of course, immediately blamed upon the Chinese, and at 11:30 p.m., Ochiai presented the local Chinese with 2 demands. The first was to evacuate the Chinese force, and the second was to allow the Japanese to occupy their south gate at Shanag for a time being. Now, the Japanese had legitimate pretexts for these demands, based off of the Boxer Protocol. It allowed them the right to ensure the security of the railway and the telegraph lines, and to defend their citizens and property within 2 miles of the railway zone. Since Manchukuo's troops allegedly disturbed the peace in said zone, the Japanese were in their right to ask them to depart. According to Japanese sources, the Chinese refused at first and then consented at 4:50 a.m. on January the 2nd. This effectively saw them surrender the South Gate. However, at 9:30 a.m., the Chief of Staff for the Chinese Brigade requested that the takeover of said gate be postponed until the scheduled arrival of Manchukuo coming over from Beiping. Ochiai turned down this request, whereupon the Chinese agreed that the South Gate would be included within the area overseen by the Japanese. Yet at 10:50 a.m., Japanese troops went to take over the guarding of the South Gate, whence Chinese guards tossed grenades at them. Yet it is most certainly the Japanese who tossed said grenades. The Chinese account of this event is somewhat different. It asserts the Japanese attacked the gate while the issue of surrender was still being negotiated. By January the 11th, China sent a formal appeal to Britain, France, and the United States and other signatories of the Boxer Protocol, charging the Japanese for perverting the treaty to seize the south gate of Shanag. Meanwhile, Manchukuo called Ochiai from Qinhuangdao to tell him he would arrive by 8 a.m. on January the 3rd to negotiate. But by 10 a.m. he failed to show up, as the Chinese and Japanese began firing upon another. Ochiai thereupon resolved to take the south gate by force. By that point, the IGA 8th Division had strengthened its position in front of Shanag. 2 companies had become 10, and 1 Air Force company was made ready to strike. Additionally, the commander of the 2nd China Fleet, Tsuda Shizue, dispatched Hirado and the 16th Destroyer Squadron to Shanag and Qinhuangdao, with said orders. to defend Japanese residents and assist the troops in case of hostilities. At dawn on January the 3rd, the Japanese launched a combined land, sea, and air assault, and by 2 p.m. they had taken Shanag. Manchukuo's forces were pushed to the Shu River, where they were reinforced during the night and hastily began constructing fortifications against what was expected to be an incoming Japanese invasion. Henceforth, a propaganda war emerged over Rehe. Japan charged that Zhang Shiliang was mobilizing large forces to advance into Rehe, while China claimed the same of the Japanese. The Chinese protested the Japanese seizure of Shanag, but none of the Western powers would intervene. However, the League of Nations' constant condemnation of Japan ever since the Mukden incident provoked the Japanese on March the 27th to simply walk out of the League. The ordeal also prompted Prince Sayoji Kimimochi to dispatch Major General Imuzu Yoshijiro, the Chief of the General Affairs of the Army General Staff, and Consul Tanaka Sotaro of the Foreign Ministry to go over and restrain the unruly troops at various positions in Beiping, Tianjin. Saiyonji's main concern was elevated by Army Minister Araki Sadio, who on March the 6th stated to Harada Kumo that if Japan were to land about 3 divisions at Qingdao and then strike into the Beiping-Tianjin region via Xian'an, Zhang Shiliang will probably flee even before they reach Xinan. If we do anything at all, I'd like to act boldly and go that far. Despite claims by various sources, mostly Chinese, the Shanag incident, as it became known, was not actually a pre-planned Quangong Army invasion. It was really an arbitrary act on part of a garrison commander. How everything went down at Shanag provided vital intelligence on the Northeastern Army and what to expect in Rehe, however. In December of 1932, the IJA 6th Division was dispatched to Manchuria and assigned security detail in southern Jilin province. They were given further secret orders to participate in what was going to be an Operation Rehe once they arrived to Manchuria. When the Shanag incident broke out, the Ruh Operation was expedited rapidly. Therefore, the IJA 6th and 8th Divisions west of the Liao River were immediately tossed into the operation. Given the foreign and domestic conditions, the Ruh Operation was extremely dangerous. Tokyo HQ yet again sought to rein in the men, so they had sent General Imuzo to Manchuria to talk to the Kwangtung leadership. The Kwangtung leadership was adamant the operation be unleashed before the spring, provided the operation did not extend beyond the Great Wall. And to this, Tokyo HQ yet again relented. On January the 27th of 1933, General Muto Nobuyoshi, the commander of the Quangtung Army, issued the following general order for the Ruh Operation, designated Operation Nekka. The situation in Johul has become increasingly serious day by day, and has now developed into a state of affairs necessitating intervention. To strengthen the foundations of Manchukuo, the time is close at hand, as far as military operations by the Quangtung Army are concerned, to put the finishing touch on our sublime task. First, the affairs of Johul province are unquestionably an internal problem of Manchukuo. They neither embrace nor are accompanied by any international implications. Because subjugation of the province is designed to strike a fatal blow to anti-Manchukuo, anti-Japan elements, these elements purposely confuse the distinction between Johul and North China. They move troops into the province, glossing over these matters, raise a loud outcry, propagandize that Japan harbors designs of territorial aggression. In this manner, they have endeavored to draw the restraining attention of the world, and every move of the Quangtung Army in Johul, even the slightest raising of a hand or the stretching of a leg, is now the object of a worldwide surveillance. At this stage, the Quangtung Army treated the Ruh Operation as an internal matter of Manchukuo. It did not openly talk about extending it beyond the Great Wall into Hubei province. But they're gonna. On January the 26th, General Muto issued Order 466. Kind of funny how it sounds almost like Order 66, but I digress. This order directed the IJ 6th and 8th Divisions to prepare an invasion of Rehe. On February the 9th, Muto drafted the Rehe subjugation plan to some staff officers. It stated, without specific orders, operations are to be carried out into Hubei. It also stipulated they should foster and promote a climate leading to the downfall of Zhang Shiliang in North China, which is the strategic base for the disturbance of Manchukuo. On February the 27th, Muto issued Order 473, which repeated to the men again not to move into Hubei. On the 29th, Mudo issued another order. The subjugation of Johul is purely and simply an internal problem of Manchukuo. In the light of our national policy, it must not develop into a provocation for a war with China. This is why Quangong Army Operations Order 473 stipulated that unless specific orders are issued, operations are not to be conducted beyond the Great Wall into Hubei province. I fully expect you to issue strict orders to the various units under your command that although our forces may act freely in Johul, which is part of Manchukuo, they are not, without an imperial command, allowed to take any action in Hubei province, which is separated from Johul by the Great Wall. They should be admonished, and even in the light of local circumstances, they must never be blinded by tactical considerations and miss the main point of our national policy. In particular, the garrison of Shanag should be doubly careful and not act beyond its authorized limits. I have learned that His Imperial Majesty, the Supreme Commander, is gravely concerned about the foregoing, and again issue these instructions in awe of His Majesty's concern. Thus, one can read between the lines here. Emperor Hirohito put his foot down and demanded no forces go past the Great Wall, and that his Quangong Army should obey. For Operation Nekka, the IJA 6th and 8th Division would have their own theaters of operation along a line running from Paozu, the easternmost town of Rehe, to Chaoyang. The northern zone was the IJA 6th Division's theater. The southern one was the 8th. General Sakimoto Massimo led the 6th Division and ordered his forces on February the 23rd to advance north along the railway line between Tahushan and Tangliao, and then on towards Tianshan, Shaohua, and Chaoyang. Afterwards, they would carry out operations in the Qifeng, Linshu, Tulan region. General Nishi ordered his 8th Division, excluding one unit, to advance along the border around Peipiao, towards Suqiang on the 27th, then into the Lingyuan region. The other unit would secure as fast as possible the important gateways along the Great Wall of China, Jilinkou, Lenkou, Shifengkou, Luwenyukou, and Malanquan, to protect their division's flank. Afterwards, they would seize Chengdu and Gubeikou. However, he also gave explicit orders. Without specific orders, operations must not be extended beyond the Great Wall in Hubei province. So yeah, while they had direct orders to not advance beyond the Great Wall, they were basically going to capture all the key passes along the Great Wall, kind of playing with fire. On the other side, on January the 23rd, Jiang Shiliang was meeting with Chiang Kai-shek and our old friend Duan Qire to discuss how to prepare for what seemed to be an impending invasion of Rehe. Chiang Kai-shek politely said to Duan Qire, "I sincerely hope that you will come south and give me your guidance at this time of national crisis." The real reason he sent this request was basically he did not want the Japanese to enlist their former lackey against him. At the meeting, according to a Japanese intelligence report, Jiang Shiliang insisted that Chiang Kai-shek personally come north and assume direct command of the northern troops. Chiang Kai-shek refused on the grounds he had to deal with the communists in Jiangxi, so he sent in his place Yang Ku, the current president of the Army Staff College and a graduate of the Japanese Army War College. Yang would arrive to Beiping with his staff on January the 30th, where he devised a plan for joint operations with Jiang Shiliang. They anticipated the Quangong Army would cross the Great Wall at Shanhangguan, so their basic strategy was to concentrate a large force in this region, especially east of the Yao River. The force's mission would be to defend at all costs the front line at Qinghuangdao. Japanese intelligence indicated the Chinese had roughly 50,000 men, including 7,700 men of the 25th Division, led by Guan Licheng, and 12,800 men of the 2nd Division led by Yang Ku, who were sent to Miyun and Gubeikou. There were also reports that ancient art objects and documents from Beiping were being transported to Nanjing, beginning on January the 10th. To the Chinese public, this looked like shocking news. Operation Nekka was unleashed and showcased the rapid efficiency of the Quangong Army. By March the 2nd, the IJA 6th Division routed the 41st Army of General Sun Tuying. The IJA 14th Mixed Brigade of the IJA 8th Division captured the Longkou Pass on March the 4th, while the Kawahara Detachment captured Chengdu near the border with Hubei. General Nishi then assembled his main force at Lingyuan as the 14th Mixed Brigade withdrew to Chapeng. On March the 4th, Mudo issued Order 480, directing the troops to, quote, "To make preparations for operations in North China, firmly seizing the major passes along the Great Wall, mopping up resistance by the remnant troops and bandits, and restore peace and order in Johul province." One unit of the IGA 8th Division was given the task of seizing the Gubeikou Pass, and advanced as such on the 7th. Within the vicinity of Changshanyu, around 40 kilometers southwest of Chengde, they encountered 5,000 advancing Chinese forces. Here one of the first of many fierce battles along the Great Wall came to be. Until roughly March the 20th, the Quangong Army was met with fierce counterattacks coming from the main gateways of the Great Wall. Initially, the fighting went tremendously well for the Japanese, yet by March the 10th, the 14th Mixed Brigade had taken Tangchaoku, Tuomenquan, and Shifangkou. 2 days later, the IGA 8th Division began an assault upon Gubeikou. Nishi then sent the Hayakawa Brigade to seize Lowenyukou. Then on the 10th, after receiving reports that the main passes were secured, General Muto took his HQ from Jinzhou to Changchun, believing everything was already won and done. However, he would be very wrong. They had very much misjudged the Chinese strength. On the 13th, Muto and Nishi received a report that on the night of the 10th, the 14th Mixed Brigade at Shifangkou had come under heavy attack by a Chinese force led by General Song Chuyuang. Reinforcements were rapidly sent over, but they were unable to relieve the trapped brigade. On the 14th, Muto ordered General Sakimoto to lead the Mukai unit from the 6th Brigade to help out. With this, the Chinese forces were finally driven off, as the Japanese began their assaults upon Lenkou, Lowenyukou, and Chulingkou. On the 16th, the IGA 8th Division took Chuling, but the next day received a vicious counterattack by the NRA 116th Division. At Lowenyukou, the Hayakawa Brigade was counterattacked by Song Chuyuan. The Hayakawa Brigade was still able to secure a portion of the Great Wall, but they were constantly under attack and they could not progress any further. On the 22nd, Nishi was forced to order his brigade to pull back to Chengde. Over at Lenkou, the Mukai unit managed to capture the town as the 14th Mixed Brigade at Shifangkou was attacked by the NRA 139th Division. Unable to repel the counterattacks, Nishi ordered his forces back 13 kilometers on the 24th. The battles at Kuilingkou and Luankou were very intense. On March 18th, Muto realized the casualties were severe, and taking the gateways was not showing any progress. He therefore decided to divert the 6th Division's attention to Lenkou, in a flanking maneuver aimed at severing the Chinese supply lines to the gateways, and as a result, this would extend operations south of the Great Wall in the region east of the Yan River. And thus, there we have it. They were simply going to go past the Great Wall against Emperor Hirohito's orders. Operation Nekka, similar to Operation Jinzhou, was deemed essential to establish and protect Manchukuo. However, while the battles along the Great Wall were deemed necessary to create the borders for Manchukuo, their extension past the boundary literally brought them into the heart of North China. Unlike in Manchuria, the Chinese forces in North China held excellent morale. They were very willing to fight. On top of that, they had better logistics and they were fighting on top of the Great Wall, which obviously offered significant advantages. Thus, from a tactical standpoint, the Japanese had to seize the gateways and flush out the Chinese from the areas. The Chinese remained defiant. Atop the walls, the Chinese defenders would shout at the Japanese, waving anti-Manchukuo and anti-Japanese flags. Outside of the ongoing battle, Chiang Kai-shek had his own, perhaps in his mind more important battle, the one against the communists. The encirclement campaigns had all gone to shit thus far. Added to this was the invasion of Manchuria and Shanghai. As Chiang Kai-shek would later put it, "It was tantamount to subjecting the government to a pincer attack from both within and without." Basically, Chiang Kai-shek could choose to focus on the Japanese or the communists. He figured going into a full-blown war against Japan would end him and his government. Thus, he worked to reach an agreement with the Japanese in May of 1932, which had ended the Shanghai Incident. After doing so, he released a slogan: "First internal pacification, then resist external aggression." Upon doing so, he unleashed his full attention upon the communists. As we have seen, Chiang Kai-shek's last encirclement campaign proved successful. But as he was in the middle of it, Operation Nekka was unleashed. It looked extremely bad for Chiang Kai-shek, for the KMT, and for China in general. On March 20th, as a gesture to indicate to the masses Chiang Kai-shek was doing his job, he dispatched 5 divisions, roughly 50,000 men, from the Central Army to go north. Chiang Kai-shek personally traveled north from Hankou to Beiping, but no further than that. Now back on the 10th, he received the resignation of Zhang Shiliang, who had publicly been calling for a massive war against Japan so that Manchuria could possibly be recovered. Chiang Kai-shek had to replace him with General Hu Yunqin. Another major development at this time was our old and dear friend who never causes any trouble, Wang Jingwei, returned from, I believe, his 20th time in exile. He came to resume his post as president of the executive yuan, and yet again Wang Jingwei was trying to reconcile with Chiang Kai-shek. But in reality, as many of you might guess, the only reason Chiang Kai-shek never had this guy shot was because Wang Jingwei had the firm backing of the left. Thus, in order to really grab the majority of the political class, he had to play nice with them. For Wang Jingwei's part, much like Starscream in Transformers, and yes, I'm definitely going to use that analogy, he's just trying to overthrow Megatron every chance he gets, but he always fails like a dumb idiot. There was also this kind of dichotomy between the two men. Wang Jingwei was seen as a civilian leader, while Chiang Kai-shek was seen as a military leader. Together, they seemed like a perfect team, despite the fact they loathed each other. So Wang Jingwei became the civil administrator, while Chiang Kai-shek focused on the military. In regards to Japan, Wang Jingwei was following a conciliatory policy of resistance on one hand and negotiation on the other. Based on Chiang Kai-shek's new slogan, first internal pacification, then resist external aggression. Following a fight with Jiang Shilang in August of 1932 over the issue of defending Manchuria against the Quangong Army, Wang Jingwei had also resigned, trying to strong-arm Chiang Kai-shek to get rid of the young marshal. Thus, like what had happened countless times before, Wang Jingwei said he was on sick leave, and he departed for Europe for supposed treatment. When he returned 6 months later, Operation Nekka had just broke out, although the Japanese troops had not yet reached the Great Wall. Wang Jingwei immediately became acting foreign minister in place of Lu Wenquan, a supporter of Jiang Shilang who was notably anti-Japanese. Wang Jingwei kicked Lu Wenquan over to Xinjiang to deal with some conflicts breaking out over there, some fun times as we all know. Meanwhile, Hu Yingqin had been placed as the head of the Beiping Branch Military Council, entrusted with control over all military matters in North China. Hu Yingqin went to work reorganizing the forces in North China, and by mid-March he formed them into an effective battle order to face the Japanese. By bringing together the local, very disorganized forces into a unified command, Hu Yingqin hoped they would be capable alone to block the Japanese advance, leaving the Central Army completely out of the conflict. This was because Chiang Kai-shek did not want to risk losing his Central Army, considered the most elite one in all of China at this time. But Chiang Kai-shek did come around to the idea of at least testing some of the units against the Kuomintang forces. Above all, Chiang Kai-shek wanted to have his cake and eat it too. He wanted the population of China to think he was actively resisting, while in reality he was just biding time. Central Army units deployed around Gubeikou, the main gateway leading to Beiping-Tianjin region, were on their way. When the Quangong Army leaders were planning Operation Nekka, they had believed it would not be necessary to go beyond the Great Wall. But once the fighting around the walls had really kicked off, they knew immediately they could not hope to take the wall areas without getting behind the enemy. Particularly, they needed to get past the area east of the Liao River. Some 20 Chinese divisions had assembled in the Beiping-Tianjin region, and they were tossing endless counterattacks along the line of the Great Wall. In the Longkou region, a force of 7,000 Central Chinese Army units had penetrated deep into Rehe and smashed the Mukai detachment of the IJ 8th Division. These counterattacks reaffirmed the Quangong Army's leadership it was necessary to go beyond the Great Wall. It should also be noted the Quangong Army's operations in North China were not just military. The Japanese were plagued with logistical problems. There was a shortage of troops because they had driven into Rehe with only 20,000 men. Even the most determined Kuomintang general did not believe their military prowess could overcome the plains of Hubei, packed with an immeasurable amount of Chinese troops. Therefore, they had to augment their military operation with political schemes aimed at the regional warlords. During the pacification of Manchuria, the tactic of bribing local elites had worked wonders, and there was zero reason to believe it would not work in North China. All of this was done without any supervision from Tokyo HQ. On February 13th of 1933, Itagaki Seishiro, now the chief of the Mukden Special Service Agency, was transferred to the general staff without any official announcement of this promotion. He took a post in Tianjin, specifically to begin political maneuvers in eastern Hubei, and this saw the birth of the Tianjin Special Service Agency. Initially, this agency was attempting to lure all the competing warlords in North China, such as Duan Qire, Wu Peifu, Sun Chuanfang, and then he began targeting Zhang Qingyao. Zhang Qingyao had once been the protege of Duan Qire, acting as the civil and military governor of Henan province. He had once fought against Jiang Zolin in 1925, whereupon his allegiance had shifted over to Wu Peifu. During the second phase of the northern expedition, Zhang Qingyao had fought against Jiang Zolin, then controlling the National Pacification Army. When the northern expedition was over, he joined Yan Qishan's forces in Shanxi. Thus, one could easily see he was not a man of many principles, nor any specific loyalties. The Tianjin Special Service Agency first proposed to reach out to Jiang Qingyao in the hopes he could organize a coup d'etat against Chiang Kai-shek. It was further hoped he could get Song Chuyuan, Jiang Zhongxiang, Fang Qianwu, Shi Yusan, Zheng Tingshu, Sun Taiying, and Feng Jianhai to join in. If they managed this, North China would fall in a single stroke. It was hoped this would all be achieved as they were taking the Great Wall, and en route towards Beiping. However, on May the 7th, Jiang Qingyao was assassinated, completely ruining this plan. I would like to take this time to remind all of you this podcast is only made possible through the efforts of Kings and Generals over at YouTube. Please go subscribe to Kings and Generals over at YouTube to help us produce this content by checking out www.patreon.com/kingsandgenerals. And hey, don't forget about our sister podcast over at the Pacific War Week by Week podcast, written and narrated by me. And if after all that, if you're still hungry for some more history, why don't you check out my personal channel, the Pacific War channel found over at YouTube, and Echoes of War found on major podcast platforms. It just so happens over on YouTube, I just released an episode covering Operation Nekka and the defense of the Great Wall. They can also be found in podcast forms over at Echoes of War. If you'd like to further support me, please check out my YouTube membership or my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/thepacificwarchannel. By joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, early access to all the content I make, and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. Operation Nekka had been unleashed with a large bang. 20,000 Japanese troops stormed Rehe province under strict orders not to go past the Great Wall of China. So they immediately began planning to go past the Great Wall of China. Yet what they did not expect was the determination of Chinese defenders who were not going to allow them an easy time.